Quick intro again. What's your name?
Very quick. My name is Peter Weston from the Netherlands. I work for a consulting company doing RDS and TS implementations, RDS MVP. With me is
Benedict, also MVP, CTP, EUC champion. In the community with all the three major vendors out there, self-employed, my own little consulting company, and my contracting with Lakeside Software at the moment, so they bought a majority of my time.
Okay, good. So again, the agenda. We're going to start by sort of explaining what Azure RemoteApp is for the people who not have heard about Azure RemoteApp. We'll sort of lay the foundation for the rest of the session, explaining what the concept is behind Azure RemoteApp. And then the rest of the session will all be around use cases and scenarios. So we'll take a look at some real-life use cases based on our own experience to see if Azure RemoteApp could be a good fit in those scenarios. One of the scenarios is if I'm an administrator and I'm dealing with Azure RemoteApp on a daily basis, will my life become easier? Or maybe not, we'll see. And if I'm an end user, what is the experience like? What are the client types like? And what can I expect as an end user if I'm consuming Azure RemoteApp? Then we'll take a look at two real-life use cases based on our own experience to see if Azure RemoteApp could be a good fit in there. And we'll end off the session with sort of our conclusion on where we think that Azure RemoteApp stands today, to sort of give you a heads up on that. So to start, we'll take a look at the concept.
Let's go through the foundation real quick because we have 48 minutes left. And so I want to make sure that we are able to cover the use cases in the end. And so most of you should be aware how RemoteApp works. So you publish the applications and you only see the seamless window on the client side. This is something that Citrix administrators knows in so many years. It's pretty much the same thing on the Microsoft side. Now you put everything on Azure and this is what it is. Now if you look at how Microsoft looks at these things, they have the session-based computing that we all know that was referred to as terminal services in the past, and then we have VDI infrastructure, that's all on premises. And if you look at the cloud solution, we have the session-based computing in the cloud, which is again like the terminal services, remote desktop session host with full desktops, and we have cloud-based applications, and that's exactly what we're talking about. It is the individual applications seamlessly deployed from a cloud infrastructure. And it's a turnkey solution. So the applications are delivered from the Azure platform. It uses the RDP protocol, and it uses RemoteApps. It has different clients. It's very different to the old times when Microsoft only supported their own Windows client system. Now you have iOS, you have Mac OS, you have Android. Later we're going to be talking about HTML5. So this is the new Microsoft, the Microsoft 2.0, so to say. And so they're opening up when it comes to the end device, and that's very important to know when we're talking about Azure RemoteApp. So Microsoft claimed that it's easily scalable without a large capital expense, and we will be talking about that when we will introduce you to the use cases. And the best thing of Azure RemoteApp is that you don't need any investments when it comes to setup. So there are a couple of steps that you have to walk through, and this is something that Frank will cover in a couple of minutes. One important point is how expensive is it? And as a matter of fact, if you start using it, it is fairly cheap, because what Microsoft does is they always use the same VM size. It's always 4 cores and 7 GB of RAM, no matter how you created the initial image, because it is re-imaged as soon as the Azure RemoteApp infrastructure is being created behind the scenes. And the only difference between the service plans that Microsoft offers is how many users max are on each of the VMs. Now, if you just think about it, it's 4 cores and 7 GB of RAM, and the basic plan allows up to 16 users on this particular VM. So you all know that these users will compete for the resources. So, well, this is not the best user experience that people will get if they're starting to use many applications and resource-intensive applications. So they added standard, they added premium only a couple of months ago, and premium plus. Basic and standard were the two plans that they had right from the beginning with 16 or 10 users with a starting price of $10 or $15 per user. So this included the 40 hours. If you used more than the 40 hours per user, then there's the extra price, this overage price per hour. But it could never get more than the capped price. So that was the maximum. But for basic and standard, you always have to buy at least 20 users. So the maximum with basic would be $7 times 20. This is the maximum if your users are using the system, well, basically around the clock. Then we said from the community, this is not a good idea if you want to get started. You need to have plans with less minimum user amount and with more with more capacity per user. And so they decided that they want to introduce Premium and Premium Plus, and you see the price is fairly higher. But the thing is, if you only have 5 users minimum times $20, in the end it's even cheaper if you have a small number of users. The minimum price is cheaper than even with Basic and Standard. And you only have 4 users or 2 users on each of the VMs. So it's not a real load balancing, it's just filling up VMs. That's how it basically works. So don't think of load balancing here. It is just as soon as the maximum user number is hit, they create a new VM, and then the new users go to the new VMs. So this is how it works. And yeah, this is the price list. Allows you to take a look at that. Yeah, there's a question.
Yes. When it's spending more multiple VMs, if you've got the users which are working on the same data set, so what applications maybe like say line 50, which has a flat file structure and all the users are accessing these files, or an application that is built around a database, how will that work?
We'll
Hang on, this is something that we will be covering.
Yeah. So now that we've seen the basic concept behind Azure RemoteApp, let's take a look at the admin scenario. First thing, Benny mentioned this as well, is that Azure RemoteApp is all about not having to manage a complex RDS backend. So when comparing this to an on-premise environment where you typically have to manage the connection broker, web access, gateway, all those roles, you don't have to manage them in this scenario anymore. This is all included in the service. That also means that they're responsible for things like high availability and for load balancing and scaling as well. And scaling is important because typically in an on-premise environment you have to figure out a way how many session host servers do I need to be able to handle the workload, and when do I need to scale up additional session host servers, or when can I possibly scale down to save costs. That's all included. So the management tools are the Azure portal, which is currently the V1 portal. We hope to see it move to the V2 soon, and also PowerShell. So we'll do a few demos on PowerShell in a few minutes as well to see what the management is like. The basic idea is that you are partially in control. So again, when comparing this to an on-premise environment, you cannot do things like field customization or branding of the environment. This is really a turnkey solution where you are only partially in control of the environment. So when we zoom into the diagram of a typical Azure RemoteApp deployment, it always starts with the custom template image. And this is a Win 2012 R2 VM running in Azure IaaS. And in that VM you install your application landscape. So this can be MSI installed, it can be FV, it's all supported. You then syspread that VM and shut it down. And you deliver that VM template to Azure RemoteApp. Azure RemoteApp will then start to create a session host collection, which is basically cloning the VM and creating new VMs for you based on that template image. As an administrator, you can then publish the applications using the Azure portal or using PowerShell. And because this is a hybrid scenario, The session host service will become member service of your on-premise domain. So they will actually show up in your AD console, in the OU that you specify. Which means you can also leverage existing group policy, existing logout structure you may have, and manage the session host service the way you are used to doing that in an on-premise environment. That also means that they can access any on-premise resource, and this is probably your question. Using ExpressRoute, preferably, they can access any on-premise database server, SQL server, application may need to be able to work. Optionally, you can also move those servers to Azure IaaS as well to have a full cloud solution.
Wouldn't that be a problem performance-wise? I mean, having the servers in Azure, talking to the backend on your on-premise.
So the question was if there's a performance impact of that. Sure, absolutely. If your connection between your data center and Azure has latencies or bandwidth is missing, absolutely, you will have impacts on performance.
It also depends on the ExpressRoute type that you choose. So there's different types of ExpressRoute for different workloads.
But like Fred pointed out, you can also put everything in Azure. That belongs to your backend, and then connect it within Azure.
Makes more sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. It always depends if you really want to see all your backend components in the cloud or not.
There could be a legal reason why you cannot place a DB server, for example, in Azure IaaS. So accounts are synced using Azure AAD Sync, which is similar to any other application that is in Azure, like for example Office 365, to be able to have accounts in Azure AD. And any user will use the Azure RemoteApp client, and will then on that scenario after this one use RDP 8.1 RemoteApps to access those applications. So when looking at the application lifecycle management, it's important to realize that that's also different than you're probably used in an on-premise environment. Again, it always starts with the custom template image that contains your applications. You then start to publish the applications and assign users. Users are able to utilize and evaluate and use those applications. But then for any update you do, for any application update or any update to the OS template image, you have to redo that whole process again, which means you have to recreate the collection.
That goes back to the initial question that you had. How do I manage my own applications in such an environment? Yeah, you have to create your image template, including your application. Then you sysprep it, and then it's deployed on Azure using the ARA mechanisms behind that. So, and you have to maintain it yourself.
Would it integrate with UEM solutions?
The question was, would it integrate with UEM solutions? Yeah, theoretically it would, because basically it's nothing else but a VM that you're running. If you can automatically connect to the UEM backend, it absolutely works, because you can imagine that I'm asking exactly the same question when it comes to monitoring. And it's a little bit tricky because it needs to connect automatically, because it's a random server name that it gets assigned to. And so if the backend supports that kind of scenarios, absolutely you can do it.
Actually, Microsoft advised to use third-party tooling for UEM.
Yes, Microsoft advises which ones you can use, UEM tools. But there are so many UEM tools out there, and people are playing around with it. If their own tools also comply with what's provided to ARA, yeah, that's an option. But like Fred said, it's not so easy. It's not like on-prem. More questions?
So an application update will require downtime for users? Or do you double up on the amount of VMs?
That's a good question. As soon as you update the collection, what they will do is they will provision a new set of session host servers based on your new template. And they will leave the other ones sort of in production. So any active user can still use that environment.
But that's not at an extra cost.
Not an extra cost, no. As soon as that process is finished of recreating the new VMs, any user that's still active on the current service will get a message saying, please log off in the next 60 minutes to be able to relaunch to that new VM.
And it's also important to notice that as soon as users are disconnected, even though their sessions are still running, you are not charged for that.
Yep.
That is the very important thing.
You only charge for an active session.
Only active sessions are being charged.
So,
Is there a synergy? There was this announcement around Citrix
Oh,
delivering to desktop.
let's hold that back for later, because that's an important thing.
No spoilers!
okay, so because of this update mechanism, we advise to always move applications away from the custom template limits as much as possible. So you start using AppV or Unidesk or FSLogix or your favorite tool to sort of minimize the amount of times you need to update that collection. Obviously, small modifications can still be done on the provisioned service because these are member servers of your on-premise domain. You have domain admin on these machines, so there might be an application that needs a certificate file being replaced. You can use group policy preference to still manage those machines as well.
Great question.
Yeah.
Can you use a software deployment tool to provision software to those servers without editing a master image? I think
If you
can do
can
that
use
as
the
long as
software deployment tool, this is something that we are asking Microsoft constantly to add to the functionality of Azure Remote App, because until today, you cannot.
if you could put a REST AM agent or SCCM client in the master image.
Yeah, but the thing is that as soon as something happens and it's re-imaged, which can happen, everything is gone and you start from scratch again, because it uses the master image and does an unattended setup, injecting some of additional services into that image. So it's not the same image that you would be using on-prem. And so you have to make sure that your agent is there, and then all the deployment starts again. So it's not, from that perspective, it's not the best solution. So we're constantly asking Microsoft to come up with something that helps us to sort of update the existing up and running VMs.
Although REST did announce not long ago, they are now officially supporting site to support Azure Remote App as well. So they are moving to that area as well.
One silly question is published app or published desktop counted as
No.
an app?
Okay, that's on.
No,
Not yet.
it's not included.
Not yet.
No comment on that.
So user assignment. When you have the applications, you need to start to assign users. It's important to realize that Azure Remote App is a user-based model, so you need to add users to the portal one by one separately. You do not have an option to say, I have an AD group, I want every member in this AD group to be allowed to use Azure Remote App. It doesn't work that way. You can use a CSV bulk import initially to bulk sort of the initial group. However, since this is all PowerShell, you can create your own PowerShell scripting and have an on-premise group member be synced to Azure Remote App on a scheduled task, for example, and we'll demo that as well. Important to realize is also that there's no per application publishing. Question?
There was a preview for that. Did that get killed?
Yep. The question was if there was a preview and that got killed. Absolutely.
There was a preview PowerShell command that was released to allow you to sort of assign a specific application to a specific user, although it got pulled because there were some issues in regards to billing, because it allows you to add users to multiple collections at the same time without having to pay for it. It will probably get back, but...
So it was not a technical problem.
No,
It's a commercial problem.
Optionally, what you can do is create a separate collection per maybe department or per user role. You do not get additional billing for that because you are paying for a fixed price per user per month. Although you would be managing multiple collections probably for the same organization. You can create multiple collections specifically for a group of applications or a group of users. Then the elastic runtime. This is not load balancing, this is cloning. So what they do is they get your Azure Remote App template image and they start cloning that image and creating new sessional host servers for you. But they do not do load balancing. So the first user that logs on to the collection will go to the first machine. And so does the second user and the third user until that machine is full, as we've seen, 10 users per VM. Then the 11th user will go to the next VM, and so forth. And during that process, they are provisioning new session host servers in the back end for you. And what they do is they look at the past 7 days to sort of predict how many session host servers you need during your office hours. And that's the adaptive scaling. So there could be scenarios where that doesn't really work. A login storm scenario at 9 a.m. where 1,000 users logging on at the same time. Optionally, what you can request is what they call capacity mode. And in capacity mode, they are provisioning all the session host servers at the same time for all of the users that could possibly access the environment without any additional costs. There is a downside to that because updating the Azure ModeApp collection depends on the number of session host servers that are being deployed as part of your collection. So if you have deployed hundreds of session host servers, updating their collection could take days. Right? Yeah. So be aware of that.
Is there some kind of refund if a VM was to crash, or
Not that I know.
They do offer a SLA where they say they have an uptime of 99.9 something %, and you do get a service credit when they're.
That's the only thing that you get, but nothing specific when your application cannot be deployed. Full question?
Let's say you're on the basic plan that is 10 users on one VM, for example.
Yeah.
And let's say the 11th user going to log in. How much time does he has to wait till that VM gets
They're trying. Yeah, that's a good question. How long is the time until the next user that goes beyond that limit of users for one VM has to wait? And they try to predict that this user will be logging on, so they try to minimize that time. But we did some measurements when it comes unexpectedly, and it takes up to 10 minutes. So the user sees well, doesn't see anything. It's basically the user is rejected, gets a message box that says they're spinning up new VMs and stuff like that, but it takes like 10 minutes. And the user has to constantly click and try to get back, so it's not a very pleasant experience.
So there's no way that you can lower the threshold at which it will start spinning up new?
No, you cannot modify the algorithm that's running in the background when it starts spinning up new VMs. No way.
It's important also to realize that any trial collection of Azure ModeApp you're probably using that doesn't have the adaptive scaling in there. So that uses sort of a real rough scaling where they start to provision a new VM as soon as the first VM is half full. So we don't.
Yeah, it's like if you have a limit of 10 users, when the 7th user logs on, they already spin up the next VM. But like we said earlier, if you have a log-on storm, this is not the way to go. And we had long conversations with them about log-on storms. And the people at Microsoft who develop Azure RemoteApp, they are developers. They are not IT pros. And so we had to educate them about the concept of log-on storms.
Did you succeed in that?
Well, partially. They are willing to understand.
Which is good.
Which is good.
That counts as a success.
So looking at the demo, this is the Azure portal, and I'll zoom it in a little bit. Here are a few Azure ModeApp collections currently running. Let's zoom into one of those collections to see some properties of this collection in particular. We see that the template image on which this collection is based on the virtual network, the location, and here you see the organizational unit in my on-premise AD where the session host servers as part of this collection are being placed. So if we switch to that location in my on-premise AD, what we'll see is a couple of servers. So I'll leave this. A couple of servers. These servers are being created as part of the Azure ModeApp collection. Now, this might look like a lot of servers for a small trial environment, and that's because not all of these servers are currently in production. And that is because Azure ModeApp will start to create these computer objects in this AD location, but will not remove them as part of the update process. So about 80% of the objects that you see here are orphaned AD objects in your AD. Now, the average AD administrator will not like you for that. So, what they did came up with is a PowerShell command to actually grab the orphaned AD computer objects from this collection and to be able to delete them. But that's a manual PowerShell process command task that you need to add to your environment. So be aware.
I trust there's a feature request to get this scheduled.
If there's a feature request to get that scheduled, absolutely there are so many feature requests to make the enterprise ready, and
this is one of them.
This is one of them, absolutely.
Yeah. So when you look at the user access, you can see that currently there is a single user added to this Azure RemoteApp collection, and I have an option here to add additional users, or optionally use the bulk user add to be able to add a CSV file that contains my UPNs to be able to add hundreds of users at the same time. Now, we'll probably be looking at in a production environment is using PowerShell for that. And what I did is I have a PowerShell script here that grabs a local group, my on-premise AD, and gets the name of the collection, the name of the local group, and the name of the publishing file in this case. And it will start to sync users from my on-premise environment towards Azure RemoteApp. So we'll take a look at the membership of a local group, add those users to Azure RemoteApp, and remove any users that are not in the group to be able to do that. So when we switch back to the portal and refresh the screen here, we should be able to see that new users are now being added to the portal as part of this PowerShell.
And all using the crappy hotel network.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
The users are being added here. I think there's a few, 4 or 5 users that they will add, and then we'll finish off with sort of a summary of what your users are being added to this collection. Now you can do this obviously using a scheduled task to be able to run that in the background, but this is the way it could work.
Man, the demo gods are with you, huh?
It's the monkey.
It's the monkey, yeah. It's the pink Vegas monkey.
So refreshing this, we'll see the 5 users new added to the Azure RemoteApp in this case. So publishing applications, again, this is in the portal relatively simple. What you can do is you have 2 options here. You can either provide the path to the program, so simply providing C program files application.exe, or using the publish Azure RemoteApp programs option, and that allows you to simply select applications from this diagram here, and these are being captured from your template image. So if you have an application installed in your template image, make sure you provide a shortcut in C program data, Microsoft Windows, blah 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 program files. Have a link there, and it will show up in the portal here.
There are also PowerShell commandlets for that.
Yep.
You can use those, and this is what I did when I installed my test applications.
Yep. In fact, let's use PowerShell right now. Thank you, Vinny. So here is the PowerShell command to simply publish Azure RemoteApp program, the collection name, and the path to the executable, including the display name, and is now being published. So when I switch back to the portal, you'll now see that the application, which is Geno Pro, is now being published. As soon as that process is finished, the actual icon of the application will show up, and the application is now available for any user in this collection.
You will need to refresh your client in order to see the icon on the client side. I will show you the clients later.
Yep. So last thing I want to show you before we move to the client side is that because these objects are in your on-premise ID, you probably got this, but you can use your own policies on that OU to be able to manage the session host service as if you were running on-premise. That's about it for the admin. Any questions on that?
Does Microsoft apply their own security baselines by default?
Oh.
Because if I look at this,
Microsoft does
you're
apply their...
only getting the base.
Yeah. The question was if Microsoft applies their own security baselines. And what they do is they introduce a couple of more services I will show you just in a couple of minutes. And that's pretty much all that they do. The rest is on you.
So when you are creating that template image, in Azure IaaS preferably, they do provide a 2012 R2 VM that is optimized for Azure Remote App. So that already contains the session host role and the desktop experience features. So use that as a base to start installing your applications.
How does it work with licensing?
Licensing is completely covered. You don't have to install any licensing component. You just deploy the VMs. The license is included in the price for the plan. That's it. No license server, nothing. What question? Whoa,
Yeah, two questions. What about storage? Because storage could be a potential performance killer.
Storage of the session host server, you mean?
Yes.
Currently it's the A3 VM, as we said. That's not the best VM out there. Hopefully they will move to a more model where you can actually choose the VM and be paid on the VM that you choose rather than the user to add to that. But
okay, so now it's A3 fixed and there's no...
There's no way to go away from this A3 today.
There are, if you go and talk to Microsoft and have a really specific case and say the A3 VM really doesn't work for me, please provide me the D3. They are able to do that on a per collection or per scenario basis. But what the result will be for your billing, we don't know. So,
okay. Second question is, you mentioned the RDS licenses in there. Does this also include the AppV license then?
I think so, yeah, because the RDS Cal is included in this license, so probably.
Okay.
So the question was if the AppV license is included. Yes, I believe so. Okay, just stay there and you start the videos because we only have like 3 or 4 minutes left for my part of the client side of things because we want to cover the use cases. So if I'm an end user, I have several options to use to consume Azure Remote App. So if you click, we have the first one, the traditional client. It's they call it the click once client because it's developed in this click once metaphor. And well, you install it natively on your Windows box and you use it. You cannot use any of the third-party tools that are out there that are using MSTSC as the DLL that they embed. So it is, the reason for that is that Microsoft wanted to be able, when they update the backend, they also control the update of the front end. So whenever you start this client, it will check if there's a new version and it will instantly install it before you even see the icons. And by doing it that way, they control both ends of the communication channel. And this is why they did it. But shortcuts are placed in the local start menu, so you have some sort of local experience and you can pin those icons to the start menu. So this is something that you can do. And the other interesting client that they came up with is completely what they call client-less. So you don't need to install anything on the end device. All you need is an HTML5 compatible browser, which is available on all the different operating systems, and all the different versions of the browsers are working with this HTML5 implementation. I like that idea very much because suddenly we have these applications also available on Linux, which was not the case before. So as soon as you have a compatible browser on a Linux operating system, you're fine and can use Azure Remote App. I mean, it's not the same functionality, it's not the same feature set like redirection of printers and local drives and clipboards because of the sandboxing that you do within a browser. The third option is that they are working on a Windows Universal App. This is currently in preview. This is what they want to use on, well, across the board of all their different devices. And if there will ever be something like a Surface phone or something that may be released in the far future, this will be the preferred platform. And it comes from the Microsoft Store. It's a store app. And they are still hoping that this is the future. I'm not so sure about it. I mean, you can use it on Windows 10 Continuum. This is when you connect your phone to a hub, and this hub is responsible for displaying stuff on the screen, and it adapts automatically to the form factor of the screen. This is a great idea, but it's not very popular out there. So what I want to do is I want to show you a video because we don't have that much time left and I can do it as a live demo. I want to show you the video of the HTML5 client. Okay, let's start with the Windows client. So this is sort of the experience that you have when you're using this Windows client and log on. So like I said, you authenticate either with your Microsoft ID, which I do in this case, the Azure ID, or if you have this redirection to your on-prem solution, you use your own login credentials that you have in your own domain. I start Explorer first, and I would like to suggest that we stop the video here because I'm doing pretty much the same thing with the HTML5 client, so I can walk you through this sequence when we start the HTML5 client. So this is how you use it. I used Edge for that. Finally, I found a use case for Edge. Yeah. And again, doing the same thing, doing a log on and signing in there. And now the user experience is a little bit different because now you see it all in a browser, but which means that your desktop is basically the client area in a browser. You click on the icon. Within the client area of the browser, it starts the application. You see it's the same thing, it's Explorer. Now, if I look at system properties, you will see the 7 gig of memory. So we have this A3 VM that's working behind. We see the random name, the computer name that was selected randomly and assigned to this machine, and which will show up in Active Directory. And now I start a second application. You see how to find the other application icons. So I start Task Manager. And Task Manager gives you the opportunity to look through which components are in the system. Hang on just a second. And you see the blue agent. This is one of the most important services that's running in here. So it does all the heavy lifting of the Azure RemoteApps stuff. But there are more of these services that Microsoft introduced specifically for Azure RemoteApp. So you see the RDP clipboard monitor, and there is also a telemetry service that's running in the background that they're using for themselves for their internal control of the Azure RemoteApp environment to collect all the data. So it's not exposed to us as the admins of such an environment. Okay, that's pretty much what the user experience is if you're using HTML5. Like I said, I like it very much because it does not require any installation. There was a question.
I noticed that the scaling was different.
That was because I had a different scaling of my browser. I think I had it at 125%.
Can you adjust it like with the browser and the screen width?
No, the screen size was exactly the same when I did it with the native client and with the HTML5 client, but I think my browser was set to 125%. And this is why it was larger. But the other thing was also you were able to see the language bar because I'm using a German keyboard, so it maps automatically to the different language settings. So this works out of the box.
Okay, cool.
Good.
And here you'll see, just to show you that the items also show up in my local start menu. Zoom doesn't really like that. But they show up here, and you're able to pin those items from there as well.
More question?
I'm still thinking of this spin up time.
Let's wait until we come to the conclusion, please.
Yeah, I noticed it said the server was part of a work group. So it does join your domain, but from the OS perspective?
No, that was mine. I had not connected it to my local domain. That was different. I just used it out of the box without domain joined to my local domain.
That's the cloud environment that Azure allows you to do that.
Yes.
So if you have an application that does not require AD connectivity or any backend, you can simply use that work group as well.
But good observation. Okay. Very good. Okay.
Right. So let's take a look at some real-life use cases based on our own experience and see what that means for Azure RemoteApp. Let's take a look at a small-sized company with about 1,000 users and 80% concurrency. They have 10 applications and do not use feed. And every user in this use case uses every application, or at least every user is allowed to use every application. They have an application backend that resides on premises. They are not a 24/7 organization, and they have a mix of choose your own devices with Windows 7, 8, and 10. This is the first scenario. So based on what we've seen, quick show of hands, who thinks Azure Remote App could be a viable option here?
Think it would work?
No.
No? Why not?
Because there's no consultant for us.
Oh, come on. Bullshit. Oh yeah, if you want to build the back end on Azure, this is huge opportunities because nobody knows how to build that. I tell you, customers are asking for that kind of help because they say, whoa, now we have the applications out there. What about the back end? We tried to build it in pretty much the same way as we did on-prem. It did not really work. Yes, great.
You still have your
Let's move back on-prem. Yeah.
So what we learned from this case, we've seen that there's no complex RDS backend, which is good because the initial setup is fast. There's a fixed price per user per month, which is good because the costs are clear, right? So various client types, so they can use Windows 7, 8, and 10 like they intended. But now we run into the first Azure Remote App limit, and that is that they have a limitation of 500 users per collection. So when you start to create a session collection or environment for 1,000 users, you need to create 2 separate collections for that.
With the same application set.
Same application set. Should not be an issue. I mean, we have PowerShell to manage that, but it's not really ideal. 800 concurrent sessions, which means that 80 session host servers, because of the 10 user limit per session host, will end up in your on-premises AD.
You were using standard.
Yeah, using standard. Yeah,
standard plan.
Yep. So it shouldn't be an issue, but please, warn your AD administrator that those objects will end up there, so you won't get scared of that scene. There's no group assignment. Should not be an issue in this case because we only have 1,000 users. There's no per app publishing, as we've seen, but for this case, every user uses every applications, so it should be fine. The elastic runtime or adaptive scaling should not be an issue for these amounts of users. The application backend resides on-premise, but we can connect it using ExpressRoute, and Windows and apps updates should not be an issue because they're a relatively small amount of applications. So our conclusion to this use case was Azure Remote App could be a viable option here. Now let's move to a more interesting scenario. A large-sized company or larger-sized company, 20,000 users.
Let me make a little comment here. These are not theoretical examples. These are real examples this man was working on. So he encountered all these little things in real life. So, okay.
Yeah. So in this case, we have 20,000 users with 20% concurrency. So this is your typical healthcare or education, university environment maybe. They have 75 Windows legacy applications they want to use for Azure Remote App, and they have about 80% of them is at fee currently. Every user potentially needs access to every application, but every user does not use every application on a daily basis. So there are users that are only using a single application, but there are also users that are sometimes need to access a specific application, and then maybe for a month later they do not have to. Again, the application backend resides on premises, so SQL servers, application servers. They do have a logon storm at 9 a.m. for 250 users at the same time. And they are a 24/7 organization with only a maintenance window on the first Sunday of each month. And they have bring your own device policy that allows a mix of Windows, Mac OS, and iOS clients. So, same question.
Do you believe that our app will work for this?
The logon storm.
Who believes that this is going to work? Nobody in this room. Wonderful.
Good. So what we learned. There's no complex, we'll start with the good stuff, right? There's no complex RDS backend, so the initial setup is fast. Again, a fixed price per user per month, that's good. Various types of clients, so they can use their iOS and Mac OS clients. But then we run into that same 500 users per collection limit. So for 20,000 users, that means 40 collections. Start to manage 40 collections for the same application landscape. Try to imagine a scenario where you need to update a single application across 40 collections with hundreds of session host servers. The time that it takes to update that environment for you is days.
One single application update, one bit changes, and it ends up in days of updating these images.
So this is really, well, technically it can be done. Custom PowerShell, right? If you're really into PowerShell, go for it.
Try to explain that to your users.
Yeah, and to your enterprise organization. So this means 4,000 concurrent sessions, which will result in about 400 session host servers. Now, again, that should not be an issue. Please, consult your session host or AD administrator for that as well. There's no group assignment, which means that we need to add 20,000 users to the Azure portal using some kind of PowerShell scripting. And not only that, how are you going to decide on which user is going to end up in which collection? You need to come up with some kind of algorithm to spread a user load across multiple collections, in this case 40. There's a lot of PowerShell, custom PowerShell there. There's no per-app publishing, so every user will see every application in the Azure RemoteApps client. As we've seen, 75 applications. So try to find that single application that you use daily in that set of 75 applications.
My test environment, I had about 30, and that was already quite busy. So now 75, no, just not what you want.
Especially when you know that there's no search option in the Azure RemoteApps client. There is, however, search in the local start menu because the shortcuts are being placed in your local start menu as well, so you can search them in there as well. Yeah, 3 minutes. Elastic runtime could work, but needs some really good testing to see if that will fit these kind of skills. Application backend using ExpressRap could work. Windows updates, the time that it takes will highly depend on the number of session host servers per collection and the number of times you need to update the environment. So our conclusion, and this is really careful, technically could work, very challenging.
You don't want it.
You don't want to do this.
You don't want it.
No.
Now the most important slide.
Yeah, so this is a slide with
limitations.
the current limitations.
Yeah.
So the 500 per session collection for the standard is not the only limitation. This is a complete list of all the applications. Now some of these are really relevant because they're only applicable to trial collections, but please be aware of these limitations. Interesting fact also is that the idle and disconnect timeout of 4 hours is enforced on you. So you cannot change that if you want a idle time of 8 hours or maybe 16 hours.
Can you reduce it?
No.
Nope. Well, you can, but they have, what Benny showed, the blue agent, and it will kill that session.
The blue agent makes sure that all these settings stay intact.
Yeah. We tried.
Hang on, let's finish and then we go back to the questions. So, yeah, the conclusion is, and to be very honest with you, the thing is, the thing is that it's a cool thing that Microsoft put together there, but we have seen the limitations, and they are working on the roadmap to improve the quality, like we have UPD, user profile disk management, that they want to release later this week. This week, okay. So they want to integrate an Azure V2 portal and per user app assignment, all these things. They're working on those. The biggest problem that I still see is the scalability. This is by far the most limiting factor. And to be very honest, the 20,000 user project was kind of killed by Microsoft themselves because they decided that they cannot fulfill what that kind of customers is expecting from them. And that brings us back to exactly the question you were asking, which was the announcement that Microsoft and Citrix made at Synergy. And this is a very clear result of, well, what you see on the roadmap and what's missing on the roadmap. So if you go to the next slide. So our conclusion is that this is fine for users, a user number up to 500 to 1,000, giving the limits that you've seen before. But if you want to go beyond, you need a completely different architecture behind that, where Citrix is able to add massive value to what Microsoft has as a base platform. And suddenly all this announcement makes a lot of sense, not only for Citrix but also for Microsoft. Obviously Microsoft had a lot more ambitions with Azure RemoteApp, but now they're finding out, wow, this is more complicated than we thought it is. Welcome to our world. And this is basically what's in our conclusion. Yes, it's a great turnkey solution. Yes, the initial costs are low. It is an as-a-service offering as it's here. But you need to look at the use cases, at the scenario, and you need to look at the limitations and make wise decisions there. And fortunately, now with Citrix, that will be a game changer. Unfortunately, it will take us until Q4 until this all will see the light of the day. And I'm really looking forward to see that solution in combination with Senap and Desktop. And anything else? It's not an enterprise solution yet. To be very clear, Azure RemoteApp is not an enterprise-ready solution as we all know it. It is more like for small and medium-sized or POC environments or individual applications that get published just for trial versions of a software. So there are many use cases out there, but not for thousands of users. Aidan?
Any idea when they're going to bring ARM support?
Oh, the question is ARM support? We're waiting for that. Oh man, no idea.
Officially it's on the public roadmap for later this year, but it has been moved from, I think, it was supposed to be there last December.
Yeah.
But it's been moving.
Yeah, I heard September.
And it's the same thing, the question with V2 portal. And the V2 portal then has to do with Azure Stack. Well, are we going to see it in Azure Stack or not? As it stands today, no, it's not compatible, and they are still working on it. They were supposed to release it at the beginning of this year, and it still has not happened. So they're still struggling with that. Any more questions? Yeah, here was the question.
As soon as I have a special application that needs specific resources that I know from the past, I can't go with anything.
If you have a special application that has more demands, you can go to those 2 users per VM scenario. If even that is not enough, no way. So you have to build your own RDSH environment, which is possible, like traditional, and on Azure, that's possible. But then you have a different licensing model. You need to be aware that licenses are then not included.
Do you think that Microsoft will hold back on improving this and making it, better due to the kind of relation?
The question is if they want to improve it themselves, or if they want to wait for the ecosystem to come up with solutions that are more scalable. Well, the interesting thing is that when talking to Microsoft and to Citrix, they all said, hey, this Microsoft and Citrix partnership, this is only the first step, and Microsoft is open to invite more partners to come up with smart solutions that go beyond what Citrix is doing, or even compete with what Citrix is doing. Because at the end of the day, Microsoft doesn't really care who uses their services on Azure as long as you pay them money for using their services on Azure.
Yeah.
GPU support?
Very good. There will be GPU accelerated VMs. It's the N series, and we're still waiting to get our hands dirty with the N series of VMs. But this will not be an ARA thing. It will be a conventional RDSH implementation on a GPU accelerated, on an NVIDIA GPU accelerated VM. And we don't know about the price model yet.
There's a lot of use cases for that.
Yes, absolutely. There are many use cases for that, all CAD/CAM engineering and everything that you want to outsource and run in the cloud. Training environments for CAD/CAM, AutoCAD training environments, absolutely. There will be huge demand for that. They're working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, he's forgetting.
Last question, because we have to sort of...
Let's say you have a deployment and normally users using it during office hours, 8 to 5. At 6 o'clock, everybody is logged off.
Yep.
It means that there's 0 machines provisioned at that time.
That is true.
So if someone at 10 o'clock he's going to wait 10 minutes.
They will preserve it for 4 hours. That was the time. So the machines are still up and running for 4 hours. That's not enough sleep, I know. And so when they come back next morning, you have to hope that there are enough machines up and running. This is why we have this log on storm conversation.
Okay, apart from the boot storm, should someone decides to wake up very early, so it's possible to have 0 machines provisioned at any point?
No, there's always one machine. There's always one machine. Always.
Okay. Well, with that, I'd like to
thank you very much.
Thank you.